There are days when the world feels too loud, not because of noise, but because of people. Messages waiting to be answered, expectations hanging in the air, familiar faces that somehow feel heavier than strangers. And in those moments, a quiet thought slips in, almost guiltily. What if you just disappeared for a while? Not dramatically, not with anger or slammed doors, just a soft vanishing. No explanations, no updates, no checking in. Just silence, like closing a window after a long day. You may not say this out loud, you may not even admit it to yourself, but somewhere beneath the routines of daily connection, there is a subtle longing to cut everyone off. Not because you hate them, not because they hurt you today, but because something inside you feels tired in a way sleep does not fix.
When was the last time you felt truly alone, without feeling lonely? Not scrolling alone, not distracted alone, but alone in the sense that your thoughts had space to stretch without being shaped by anyone else's reactions. Many people cannot remember. Their inner world has been furnished by conversations, expectations, roles, and replies for so long that silence feels unfamiliar, almost dangerous. Psychologists have long observed that humans are wired for connection, but rarely do they talk about the cost of constant connection. Every relationship, even healthy ones, requires a version of you, a tone, a response, a self that fits into the story others expect. Over time, these versions begin to pile up. You are someone's strong one, someone's listener, someone's dependable presence, someone's disappointment, someone's hope. And slowly, quietly, you forget what you are when no one is looking. The desire to cut everyone off is often misunderstood as coldness or avoidance, but more often it is a hunger to meet yourself again without an audience, to exist without being interpreted, to breathe without adjusting your breath for someone else's comfort. You notice it in small moments, when a message arrives and your chest tightens instead of opening, when a familiar name lights up your phone and you feel fatigue instead of warmth, when conversations repeat themselves, circling the same complaints, the same jokes, the same emotional labor, and you realize you are responding from memory rather than presence. It is not that you no longer care. It is that caring has begun to feel like a performance you never clock out of. There is a quiet grief in this realization, because at some point these connections mattered deeply. They were chosen, they were nurtured, they were once places of safety. So why does distance suddenly feel like relief? Psychologists might say this is the nervous system asking for rest. When emotional demands exceed emotional capacity, the body does not negotiate. It withdraws, not out of cruelty, but out of survival. Just as muscles tremble when overworked, the social self grows weary when it is never allowed to soften. You may start fantasizing about disappearing to a place where no one knows your history, where no one expects you to be consistent with the version of you they remember, where you can wake up without immediately becoming someone for someone else. This fantasy is not about isolation, it is about autonomy. Modern life has blurred the line between connection and access. People can reach you anytime, anywhere, often without asking. And with that access comes an unspoken demand. Be available, be responsive, be emotionally present even when you are quietly unraveling. So, your mind creates an escape route, a clean break, a reset, not because you want to abandon love, but because you want to experience it without exhaustion. Have you noticed how often the urge to cut people off arrives after long periods of being misunderstood? You explain yourself, carefully, gently, repeatedly.
You adjust your language, you soften your truths, you carry others' emotions with care, and still you feel unseen, not attacked, just missed. Like you are standing in the room, speaking clearly, and somehow no one is hearing the thing that matters most. Over time, the psyche learns something dangerous, that being known requires effort, that presence requires translation, that authenticity comes with friction. And so, it begins to associate distance with peace. This is where the fantasy of solitude becomes seductive. Alone, you do not have to justify your moods. You do not have to contextualize your silence. You do not have to explain why you are tired when nothing big happened. You are allowed to be undefined. There is also a deeper layer that few people talk about. Cutting everyone off is sometimes a way of reclaiming control over your identity. In relationships, especially long-standing ones, people freeze you in time. They remember who you were when they met you. They interact with that version, even as you change quietly underneath. You outgrow roles, you shed beliefs, you soften in places that once were sharp, or harden where you once were open. But others may still expect the old responses, the old patience, the old you. And correcting them feels exhausting. So instead of renegotiating identity again and again, the mind imagines a simpler solution: absence. There is a strange honesty in wanting to disappear. It admits something many people are afraid to name: that you are overwhelmed not by conflict, but by continuity, by the endless requirement to remain recognizable. Think about how often you have stayed in conversations long after your energy left, simply because leaving would require explanation. Think about how many times you said, "I'm fine," not to deceive, but to avoid the labor of being fully known. The wish to cut everyone off is not always about others. Often it is about the version of you that only exists around them, the one who learned to adapt too well. Psychologists describe this as emotional overextension, when empathy becomes automatic, when boundaries blur, when your sense of self becomes porous. You absorb moods, you anticipate needs, you regulate rooms, and one day you realize you have been doing this on autopilot for years. The body keeps score, the mind keeps notes, and eventually a quiet rebellion forms. It does not scream, it whispers, "Enough." You may feel this most strongly during moments of transition, after loss, after growth, after a realization you cannot unsee. When your inner landscape shifts, but your outer world continues as if nothing changed. There is a loneliness in being known for who you were rather than who you are becoming. Cutting people off, in fantasy or reality, can feel like pressing pause on that mismatch, a chance to recalibrate without commentary, to grieve privately, to think without interruption. And yet, there is also fear woven into this desire. Fear that if you do not step away now, you will lose yourself entirely, that you will keep shrinking your needs to fit into conversations that no longer nourish you. So you imagine the quiet, the mornings without notifications, the evenings without obligation, the sense of being answerable only to your own internal weather. This does not make you antisocial, it makes you human in a world that rarely allows stillness without justification. What complicates this further is that the people you want to cut off are often not villains. They are not abusive, they are not cruel. They are simply present in a way that no longer aligns with where you are. And that creates guilt. Because how do you explain exhaustion without accusation? How do you ask for space without implying rejection? How do you say, "I need less," in a culture that equates closeness with constant availability? So instead, the desire stays secret, unspoken. It lives in daydreams and late-night thoughts. in the relief you feel when plans are canceled, in the quiet joy of unanswered messages. You may judge yourself for this, wonder what is wrong with you, but psychologists have found that withdrawal is often a sign of self-preservation, not dysfunction, the mind seeking to reduce stimulation when it has been stretched too thin. There is also something profoundly honest about wanting to meet yourself without witnesses, to hear your own thoughts before they are shaped into shareable language, to feel emotions without narrating them. Solitude, in this sense, is not emptiness, it is recovery. The danger is not in wanting distance. The danger is in believing that cutting everyone off is the only way to find yourself again, because the longing itself is not asking for disappearance, it is asking for authenticity without strain. Still, the fantasy persists because it is simple, clean, quiet. No more roles, no more explaining, no more being needed when you are empty. Just you, breathing, existing, becoming. And maybe the most revealing part of this desire is what it says about how rarely you feel allowed to rest as yourself, how often you feel that connection requires performance, how seldom you feel held without effort. So when the thought arises, gently, unexpectedly, do not rush to condemn it. Listen to it, not as an instruction, but as information. It is telling you something about your limits, about your unmet needs, about the parts of you that have been whispering for space long before they thought of silence. In the end, wanting to cut everyone off is less about leaving the world and more about returning to yourself, about finding a place where you do not have to earn your right to exist quietly. And perhaps the deepest realization is this: you do not want to disappear. You want to finally feel present in your own life.
And when you imagine that disappearance, notice how gentle it is in your mind. It is not chaos. It is not destruction. It is quiet mornings where no one is pulling at your attention. Evenings where your thoughts arrive slowly instead of all at once. A sense of time expanding, as if life finally stops rushing you toward the next response. This tells you something important. Your nervous system is not craving absence. It is craving safety. Safety from being misunderstood. Safety from emotional negotiations. Safety from the subtle pressure to remain consistent for the comfort of others. Psychologists often speak about identity as something fluid, but socially, identity is treated as fixed. People want you to be legible, predictable, familiar. And when you change, even in small ways, it creates friction. Not always openly, sometimes just in tone, in pauses, in the way conversations no longer flow as easily as they once did. You feel this friction, even if no one names it. So you start pulling back almost instinctively. You share less. You react slower. You offer shorter answers, not to punish anyone, but to protect the parts of you that feel tender and undefined. There is a version of you that only appears when no one is asking anything from you. A softer version, a more honest one that does not need to be impressive, useful, or emotionally available. And you miss that version. Modern connection rarely leaves room for it. Even rest has become performative. Even solitude is shared. Even boundaries require explanation. So the mind creates a more radical image, cutting everyone off, starting over, becoming unreachable. It feels like the only way to stop negotiating your existence. But notice how this urge often arrives after growth, after awareness, after you begin seeing patterns you once ignored. The emotional loops, the unspoken contracts, the way certain relationships quietly depend on you staying small, agreeable, or endlessly understanding. Once you see this, you cannot unsee it. and staying begins to feel like a betrayal of something inside you. You may begin to feel irritated by things that never bothered you before. Small talk, repetition, emotional dumping disguised as closeness. Not because you lack compassion, but because you are finally aware of your own limits. Awareness changes tolerance. This is why the desire to cut people off often comes with sadness rather than anger, a low, heavy sadness. Because you are not rejecting people, you are grieving the version of connection that once felt mutual and now feels one-sided or draining. There is also fear hiding underneath all of this. Fear that if you stay connected, you will be asked to keep giving parts of yourself you no longer have. Fear that if you speak your truth fully, you will disappoint, confuse, or lose people. Fear that distance might be easier than honesty. So the fantasy remains quiet, safe, internal. You tell yourself you just need space, but what you really want is permission. Permission to exist without explanation. Permission to change without apology. Permission to be quiet without being questioned. And because the world rarely grants that permission freely, you imagine taking it. Think about how often people confuse availability with love. How often presence is measured by responsiveness. How rarely someone says, "You don't have to show up today, I still care." When care feels conditional, withdrawal becomes tempting. Psychologists have observed that humans retreat not when they stop caring, but when caring begins to cost them their sense of self, when emotional labor outweighs emotional nourishment, when connection feels like responsibility instead of refuge. So you start dreaming of fewer people, fewer conversations, fewer obligations, not because you want nothing, but because you want what remains to feel real. There is something deeply human about this pruning instinct. Trees shed leaves not because they failed, but because holding on would harm them. Distance in this way is not rejection, it is regulation. Still, the desire can feel confusing. You may wonder if you are becoming cold, if you are losing empathy, if something is wrong with you. But what if nothing is wrong? What if this is simply the moment where your inner world is asking to be prioritized after years of being shared too freely? Wanting to cut everyone off often is the soul asking for a quieter room, a place where it can hear itself again, where thoughts do not have to be immediately translated into something digestible, where emotions are allowed to exist without being processed out loud. In that quiet, you are not empty. You are full of things you haven't had time to feel, questions you haven't had time to ask, versions of yourself that never get airtime. And perhaps that is the most honest part of this desire. It is not about isolation, it is about intimacy. Intimacy with yourself. You want to sit with your own thoughts without interruption, to notice what you feel when no one is watching, to see who you are when you are not needed. This is not a rejection of love, it is a recalibration of it. Because love that costs you your presence eventually stops feeling like love. So if this urge lives in you, quietly, persistently, let it tell its story, not as a command, but as a signal, a reminder that you are allowed to need space without being broken, that you are allowed to want less noise, less access, less performance. You are allowed to want your life to feel like yours again. And maybe in listening to that desire with curiosity rather than fear, something softens. The need to disappear becomes a need to be honest. The fantasy of cutting everyone off becomes a longing to reconnect more truthfully. Not with everyone, not all the time, but with yourself first. And from there, whatever connections remain will no longer feel like something you must escape from. They will feel like places you choose to return to.